Tom Darrow thought he had the upper hand, until the outlaw's daughter leaned in, smiled, and said, "If you're going to kill my father, I want the first shot." Tom Darrow was tired, not just sleepy tired, but bone-tired, soul-tired. The sun beat down on his dusty hat as he squinted across the dry plains. He'd been chasing Red Nolan for months, maybe even years. Tom had lost track. Each sunrise brought him closer to the notorious outlaw, but each sunset seemed to add another line to his already weathered face. His horse, a sturdy Appaloosa named Patches, plodded along, sensing Tom's weariness. Patches was just as eager to get this job done as Tom was. Tom wasn't a young buck anymore. His joints creaked, his eyesight wasn't what it used to be, and the thought of another gunfight made his stomach churn. He remembered a time when he lived for the thrill of the chase, the clink of gold, but all that had faded. Now it was just a job, a hard, dangerous job that he needed to finish. Red Nolan had robbed too many banks, hurt too many people. Someone had to stop him, and Tom Darrow was the only one close enough. He adjusted his grip on his rifle. He pictured Red Nolan's face, a sneer permanently etched upon it. Nolan was known for his cruelty and cunning. Capturing him wouldn't be easy, but Tom had a plan. A risky one maybe, but a plan nonetheless. He hoped it would be his last. He was ready to hang up his hat and spurs, find a quiet place, and maybe, just maybe, get some rest. The hideout was a small shack nestled in a rocky canyon, perfect for an ambush. Tom dismounted Patches, tying him to a scraggly bush. Crept closer, his senses on high alert. He could hear voices inside, Red Nolan's gruff tones unmistakable. Tom took a deep breath and charged, kicking the door open with a loud crash. 3 men were inside, including Nolan, who was sitting at a table counting money. The other 2 jumped up, grabbing for their guns. Tom was faster. He fired 2 quick shots, dropping the men to the ground. Nolan swore and scrambled for his own weapon, but Tom was already on him, knocking the gun from his hand. "It's over, Nolan," Tom said, his voice raspy. Red Nolan spat on the floor. "You'll never take me alive, Darrow." That's when Tom saw her, a young woman hidden in the shadows of the shack. She had fiery red hair just like Nolan, but her eyes held a coldness that even Nolan couldn't match. She looked to be about 17 years old. She was aiming a rifle directly at him. "Drop the gun, girl," Tom yelled, but she didn't flinch. He knew he couldn't risk a shot. Nolan was too close. Thinking fast, Tom grabbed the girl, pulling her in front of him as a shield. "Let her go, Darrow," Nolan roared. Tom held the girl tight. "Not until you surrender, Nolan, and tell your men to drop their weapons." The 2 men groaned and slowly did as they were told. Tom knew taking a hostage wasn't the most honorable thing to do, but he was desperate. He needed to bring Red Nolan to justice, no matter the cost. "You think this is going to stop me, old man?" The girl spat, her voice surprisingly strong. "You think he cares about me?" Tom tightened his grip, but not out of malice. He felt a strange vibration in her voice, a deep-seated anger that had nothing to do with him. "He surrendered to save you," Tom said, trying to keep his voice steady. "That says something." "He surrendered because he thinks he can escape later. He always does." She twisted in his grasp, trying to get free. "He doesn't care about anyone but himself." Tom finally managed to get her subdued. "What's your name, girl?" "Sarah," she mumbled, defeated. "Sarah," Tom repeated. "Why were you pointing a rifle at me? You could have gotten yourself killed." Sarah looked up, her eyes blazing. "Because I wanted to kill him," she yelled, surprising both Tom and her father. "I've been waiting years for this, tracking him, waiting for the right moment." Red Nolan looked stunned. "Sarah, what are you talking about?" "Don't act surprised, you monster," Sarah screamed. "You ruined our lives, you left us, you killed Mom." Tom was taken aback. This wasn't just a simple hostage situation. This was something much deeper, much darker. He looked at Sarah, really looked at her, and saw not a frightened girl, but a woman consumed by revenge. He realized then that Sarah Nolan was far more dangerous than her father ever could be. The situation had just become a whole lot more complicated. He had to figure out what to do next, and fast. Holding on to Sarah might be his only advantage, but it also might be his biggest mistake. Tom stared at Sarah, then at Red. Red was silent, his face a mask of anger and something else. Fear. Tom wouldn't have thought Red Nolan was capable of fear. "So," Tom said slowly, "you want him dead." "More than anything," Sarah replied, her voice firm. "He deserves to pay for what he did." Tom thought for a moment. He could take Red in, collect the bounty, and be done with it. But he had a feeling that wouldn't be the end of it. Sarah wouldn't let it go, and frankly, after hearing her story, Tom wasn't sure he wanted to be the one to stop her. He'd seen enough injustice in his life. "I'll make you a deal," Tom said, surprising himself. "I'll let you help me bring him in. You can come with us, help track him, help plan the capture." But he held up a finger. "When we catch him, I get to take him to the authorities. He faces justice. After that, what happens to him is up to you." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "You'd really do that?" "Why not?" Tom shrugged. "I'm getting too old for this. Maybe it's time someone else took over." He glanced at Red Nolan, who was glaring at them both. "Besides, you seem to know him better than anyone. You might be the only one who can keep him from escaping." Sarah hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll do it, but if you try to double-cross me, old man, you'll regret it." "I wouldn't dream of it," Tom said, though he knew trusting Sarah was a gamble. A big one, but he was out of options. He needed her help and she needed him. They were an unlikely team, bound together by a shared desire for revenge, and that Tom knew could be a very dangerous thing. With Red Nolan tied securely to Patches, Tom and Sarah set off. The landscape was unforgiving, endless stretches of dry brush, towering mesas, and the ever-present scorching sun. Sarah, despite her initial fire, was quiet, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "So," Tom began, breaking the silence, "where do we start?" "He'll head for the border," Sarah said, her voice flat. "He always does when things get hot. He has friends there, places to hide." "The border's a big place," Tom pointed out. "He has a favorite route," Sarah explained. "A series of old smuggler trails through the mountains. I know them well." She pulled a worn map from her pocket, unfolding it carefully. "He'll likely try to cross at Dead Man's Pass." Tom studied the map. It was detailed, with markings and notes scribbled in a faded ink. "You've been planning this for a while, haven't you?" Sarah didn't answer, her eyes focused on the map. "He'll be expecting us to follow the main roads. He'll try to lose us in the mountains." "Then we'll surprise him," Tom said, a grim smile on his face. He knew this wouldn't be easy. Red Nolan was cunning and the mountains were treacherous, but with Sarah's knowledge and his experience, they might just have a chance. As they rode on, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap, but he was committed now. He had a deal to keep and a score to settle. The hunt was on, and this time it was personal. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a dead raven hanging from a tree branch, its wings spread wide. Sarah stopped Patches. "He knows we're coming," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "That's a warning." Tom dismounted, his hand resting on his gun. "How far ahead do you think he is?" "Not far," Sarah replied. "A few hours, maybe. He'll be moving fast." They pressed on, following the winding trail deeper into the mountains. The air grew colder and the shadows lengthened. Suddenly, a volley of shots rang out from the rocks above. Tom and Sarah dove for cover behind a cluster of boulders. "Ambush," Tom yelled, firing back blindly. Sarah peeked out from behind the rocks. "It's just a few of his men," she shouted, "trying to slow us down." Tom knew they couldn't stay pinned down forever. He glanced at Red Nolan, who was still tied to Patches, looking surprisingly calm. "We need to move," Tom said. "Sarah, can you find another way around?" Sarah nodded, her eyes scanning the terrain. "There's a narrow path to the left. It's risky, but it's our only chance." Tom covered her as she moved, firing shots to keep the outlaws at bay. Sarah scrambled up the rocks and disappeared from view. A few minutes later, she reappeared, waving them forward. "It's clear," she yelled. Tom grabbed Patch's reins and followed Sarah along the narrow path. It was a treacherous climb with steep drop-offs on either side, but they made it through, leaving the ambush behind. They had survived the first test, but Tom knew it was only the beginning. Red Nolan wouldn't give up easily. And he had more tricks up his sleeve. That night, huddled around a small fire, the tension between Tom and Sarah was thick enough to cut with a knife. Red Nolan remained tied to Patches, silent but watchful. "Why didn't you tell me about the ambush?" Tom asked, his voice low. "I didn't know about it," Sarah retorted, her eyes flashing. "If I did, we wouldn't have walked right into it." "You know him better than anyone," Tom pressed. "You should have expected something." "He's my father, not a crystal ball," Sarah snapped. "I can't predict his every move." Maybe you're not trying hard enough, Tom accused. Sarah stood up, her fists clenched. Are you saying I'm helping him? I'm saying I don't trust you, Tom replied, meeting her gaze. And I don't think you trust me either. You're right, Sarah said, her voice trembling with anger. I don't. You're just a bounty hunter looking for a payday. You don't care about justice or revenge or anything but the money. And you're a girl blinded by hate, Tom countered. You're so focused on getting even that you're not thinking straight. Their argument was interrupted by a sudden noise. Patches whinnied, and Red Nolan began to struggle against his bonds. What's going on? Tom asked, grabbing his gun. Before Sarah could answer, a rope snaked out from the darkness, wrapping around Tom's legs and pulling him off his feet. He landed hard, the air knocked out of him. More ropes followed, binding his arms and legs. Sarah screamed and tried to intervene, but she was quickly overpowered by several figures who emerged from the shadows. Tom realized too late that they had been played. Nolan had used their distrust against them, setting them up for a trap. Now they were both at his mercy. Tom woke with a splitting headache. He was tied to a tree, his wrists chafing against the rough bark. Sarah was nearby, also bound. Red Nolan stood before them, a cruel smile on his face. Well, well, Nolan drawled. Looks like the hunter has become the hunted. Let her go, Nolan, Tom growled. This is between you and me. Nolan chuckled. Oh, it's between all of us now, Darrow. Sarah here thought she could betray me. Family is family. She should have known better. Nolan signaled to one of his men, who stepped forward with a branding iron glowing red-hot. Sarah gasped. You wouldn't, Tom said, his voice strained. Wouldn't I? Nolan raised an eyebrow. Family needs to be taught a lesson, especially disobedient daughters. Just as the man was about to press the iron to Sarah's arm, Tom lunged forward, knocking the man off balance. The iron grazed Tom's shoulder, searing his flesh. He cried out in pain, but the distraction was enough. Sarah used the opportunity to kick one of the other men, freeing herself from her bonds. A chaotic fight erupted. Tom, despite his injury, managed to break free as well. Sarah grabbed a knife and started slashing at the ropes holding Red Nolan. They were outnumbered, but they fought with a desperate fury. A shot rang out, hitting Tom in the leg. He stumbled, but Sarah caught him, helping him to his feet. Together, they fought their way through the outlaws, creating enough of a diversion to escape into the darkness. They managed to grab Patches, leaving Red Nolan and his men behind. They had escaped, but Tom was badly wounded, and they both knew that Nolan would be coming for them. They found a small, hidden cave behind a waterfall. It was damp and cold, but it offered some protection. Tom leaned against the cave wall, his face pale with pain. His shoulder throbbed where the branding iron had seared him, and his leg wound was bleeding badly. We need to get that bullet out, Sarah said, her voice urgent. Tom nodded weakly. There's a knife in my saddlebag. Sarah retrieved the knife and heated it over a small fire. Tom gritted his teeth as she probed for the bullet. It was a slow, agonizing process, but Sarah was surprisingly steady. Finally, she managed to extract the bullet. Tom let out a shaky breath. I need to clean the wound, Sarah said, tearing a strip of cloth from her shirt. She cleaned the wound with water from the waterfall, then wrapped it tightly. Thank you, Tom said, his voice hoarse. Sarah didn't reply, her eyes fixed on his wounds. Why did you do it? She asked quietly. Why did you jump in front of me? Tom shrugged. You didn't deserve that. No one does. Sarah looked at him, her expression unreadable. I thought you only cared about the bounty. I used to, Tom admitted, but things change. He looked at Sarah, seeing the determination in her eyes, the pain in her heart. He realized that she wasn't just a pawn in this game. She was a victim, just like her mother, and she deserved to see her father brought to justice, maybe even more than he did. As Sarah tended to his wounds, Tom felt a shift in their relationship. The distrust was still there, but it was tempered with a newfound respect. They were still an unlikely team, but now they were fighting for something more than just money or revenge. They were fighting for justice, for redemption, and for a chance to finally put the past behind them. Days later, following Sarah's keen tracking skills, they found him. Red Nolan was holed up in an abandoned mining town, a ghost of a place with crumbling buildings and boarded-up windows. Sarah pointed to the saloon, its swinging doors creaking ominously in the wind. He's in there, she whispered. I can feel it. Tom, still limping from his leg wound, checked his rifle. Stay behind me, he said. They crept towards the saloon, the only sound the crunch of their boots on the dusty ground. Tom kicked open the doors and stepped inside, his gun drawn. The saloon was dark and silent. Red Nolan stood behind the bar, a bottle of whiskey in his hand. Several of his men were scattered around the room, their guns trained on Tom and Sarah. "Welcome," Nolan said, his voice smooth as silk. "I was wondering when you'd show up." "Oh, it's over, Nolan," Tom said, his voice firm. "There's nowhere left to run." "Is that so?" Nolan smirked. "I think you'll find I have a few tricks left." Suddenly, the room erupted in gunfire. Bullets whizzed through the air, shattering bottles and splintering wood. Tom and Sarah dove for cover behind overturned tables, firing back at Nolan's men. The saloon became a chaotic battleground, filled with the roar of gunfire and the screams of the wounded. Tom saw one of Nolan's men aiming at Sarah and tackled him, wrestling for control of the gun. Sarah, meanwhile, was engaged in a fierce gunfight with another outlaw, dodging bullets and returning fire with deadly accuracy. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of gunpowder. It was a desperate fight for survival, and Tom knew that only one side would walk away alive. The gunfight raged on, but slowly the tide began to turn. Tom, fueled by adrenaline and a sense of purpose, managed to take down several of Nolan's men. Sarah, with her quick reflexes and sharp aim, proved to be a formidable opponent. They worked together, covering each other's backs, their movements becoming synchronized. Finally, only Red Nolan remained, standing behind the bar, his face contorted with rage. He raised his gun, aiming at Sarah. Tom knew he had to act fast. He charged forward, diving behind the bar and tackling Nolan to the ground. They wrestled, each trying to gain the upper hand. Tom, weakened by his injuries, struggled to keep Nolan pinned. Sarah, seeing her opportunity, jumped over the bar and pointed her gun at her father. "It's over, Dad," she said, her voice trembling but firm. Nolan looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and something else. Regret, Tom couldn't tell. "You wouldn't," Nolan said, his voice a raspy whisper. "I would," Sarah replied, her finger tightening on the trigger. But instead of pulling the trigger, she lowered the gun. "I can't," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I just can't." Tom, seeing his chance, seized the moment. He punched Nolan hard in the jaw, knocking him unconscious. The fight was over. Red Nolan was defeated. He lay sprawled on the floor, beaten and broken. He couldn't escape. They had finally caught him. But the real challenge, Tom knew, was yet to come. It was now up to Sarah to decide what would happen next. Tom waited outside the saloon, giving Sarah some space. He knew this wasn't going to be easy for her. He leaned against Patches, the sun beating down on his weathered face. He was tired, but a different kind of tired now, not the soul-crushing weariness he had felt at the beginning of this chase, but a tired that came from a job well done. Sarah emerged from the saloon, her face pale but resolute. Tom straightened up, his heart pounding in his chest. "What did you do?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm sending him to the authorities," Sarah said, her voice steady. "He'll face justice for his crimes. The same justice he denied so many others." Tom nodded, relieved. He had expected Sarah to kill Nolan to take her revenge, but she had chosen a different path, a path of forgiveness and healing. "Are you sure?" Tom asked. "This is your chance. No one would blame you." "I am sure," Sarah replied. "Killing him wouldn't bring my mother back. It wouldn't change the past. It would only make me like him." She paused, looking at Tom. "Thank you," she said, "for helping me see that." Tom smiled. "You did this yourself, Sarah. You're stronger than you think." They walked back into the saloon, where Nolan was still unconscious. They tied him up securely and loaded him onto Patches. Tom knew this wouldn't be the end of Red Nolan. He would likely escape again, causing more trouble. But for now he was contained. And Sarah had made her choice. She had chosen justice over revenge. And that, Tom knew, was the most important victory of all. Tom and Sarah rode in silence for a while, leading Patches with the unconscious Red Nolan strapped to his back. As they neared the town where they would hand Nolan over to the authorities, Sarah spoke. "What will you do now, Tom?" she asked. Tom shrugged. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe find a quiet place, maybe try to forget all this." "You could come with me," Sarah offered. "I'm going to try and find some of my mother's family. I don't even know if they're still alive, but I need to try." Tom considered her offer. He had never really had a family of his own. He had spent his life chasing outlaws, living on the fringes of society, but something had changed during this journey. He had seen Sarah's strength, her courage, her willingness to forgive, and he had learned that family wasn't just about blood, it was about loyalty and love and shared experiences. "I think I will," Tom said, a smile spreading across his face. "I'm not much good at finding relatives, but I can offer some protection along the way." He looked at Sarah and she smiled back. It wasn't a happy smile, but it was a start. They still had a long road ahead of them, but they would face it together. As they rode into town, Tom knew that his life had changed forever. He wasn't just a bounty hunter anymore. He was something more. He was a friend, a protector, maybe even a father figure. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew that he was ready for it. He had learned that revenge wasn't the answer, that forgiveness was possible, and that family could be found in the most unexpected places. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to hang up his hat and spurs for good. His bounty hunting days were likely over. There were other things to chase now, things that mattered more than gold or glory. The end.